Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on Monday instead of Sunday. Let's see here. Here is the, wait a second, the address, except once again this is incorrect, so let me find the correct one. See, this is Q Science. So this is the address for getting the soundtrack today, scientificsounds.com/Q Science. Q is in quantum, not QAnon. Let's see here. This is where you can go to ask a question or make a comment about anything we've discussed on these live streams. Let's see. And this is where you can go, sorry. This is where you can go to see all the live streams I've done up to this point. I believe today is number 98 or number 99. I have to check it out. I want to make sure I get that right. When it's number 100, we should pop a bottle of champagne or something. So let's see. And if you're new, we listen with headphones. We're doing brain entrainment, and we're doing a group mind link where everybody listens to the same soundtrack with entrainment at the same time, and everyone's brainwaves get entrained to exactly the same place. There's power in numbers, and we're trying to create global change by linking consciousness together of large groups of people. Okay. So, last week I got an email. Now, because of the Heal documentary becoming a global success, my patient loan sort of went crazy when the Heal documentary got bought up by Netflix. Then that was 100 million people watching, and my phone was off the hook. At one point, we're getting 100 phone calls a day, and tons of emails, people wanting to become patient. Then at one point I was booked up 7 months in advance, and then it collapses because who's going to wait for 7 months? Then in the last year, Amazon Prime bought the rights to the Heal documentary from Netflix. Now we've got an extra 200 million people on top of that. And once again, my phone has been off the hook. I've already been outrageously, insanely busy because of all the different things that had to be redesigned and reinvented because of the pandemic over the last 2 years. And that was the origin of these broadcasts. Originally to offer a stress solution to a world that was hyper stressed out because of the pandemic and the world situation, where a stress response reduces the immune system. You don't want to reduce the immune system in the population during a pandemic. So that was part of what this was all about. And to provide a soundtrack with science behind it to scientifically de-stress the system, and then give those soundtracks away for free for people to use in a continuing basis. That all morphed into something deeper and more important, which has to do with the concept of aligning a critical number of people's brainwaves precisely together in the same state, and creating a tipping point in the quantum field. And then whatever your intention is, has the possibility of tipping the quantum field and making that intention become true. That ended up into a foray of now almost 100 broadcasts of discussing every topic that we could think to discuss that fleshes out the concept that quantum physics has been discovering and developing over the past few decades. And the astounding nature of what's going on in the quantum field versus what we ordinarily experience as this reality, and which society has been told by the scientific community that this is what is so. Essentially Newtonian physics, that there's an objective universe and that the mathematics that describe this universe do a really good job for the most part to describe what this universe is and make projections about where it's going to go and things like that based on the math of quantum physics. But it's not 100% airtight, and the gaps and the holes in Newtonian physics and the math are continually apparent. In trying to describe the physical universe in Newtonian physics math, the math always breaks down at some point and spins off into infinities. And infinities don't work with a world view of Newtonian physics. So those mathematical values have to be adjusted to remove the reverberating circuit of math spinning into infinities. So they make adjustments so it doesn't spin into infinities. And that adjustment is an artificial construction pasted on top of the way reality actually is. So it works out nicely in the math so that we can scrub it clean so the math matches what we believe the universe to be. That is our modern scientific system. Because of that, we end up with conundrums that have to be solved by new, more complex mathematical values. But the new solutions of these values have only happened, are only necessary because of the fudging that was made further back down the line to remove the infinities. That means that fudges compound and create more fudges that are more subtle, and more on top of that, and more on top of that, because sooner or later all those mathematical values lead to infinities that have to be scrubbed and adjusted. So the whole basis of quantum of the Newtonian physics that we're taught in school, and that most of our science is based on, and in particular the total amount of modern medicine is based on Newtonian physics view of the world, is fraught with mistakes and errors, where only what I can see and touch and taste and feel is real, and everything else is woo-woo, not to be trusted, not scientific. The origins of that, by the way, was the Rockefeller Foundation backing one particular health care system because it was the one that had the possibility of making the most money. The business model, the business of health, the best business model for the business of health is to have a product to sell, a pill, a surgery. And the best product to sell would be one that you have recurring sales. Recurring sales is always the best business model. So if we could have recurring sales where we could sell you pills that you have to take for the rest of your life, then that would be cool. But it's not going to be good enough to just have those pills available to anybody. We want to be able to be in charge of and in control of your ability to get those pills. That can make them more expensive. So if you have to go through a special series of procedures to only be able to get the pills from a pill pusher with a special uniform on, who had special credentials, pill pusher credentials, then it would appear that those pills are worth a lot more money than just something on a shelf. So that is the modern medicine born out of the idea that pills are the only valid way of treating healthcare, and that the rest is alternative or complementary. Derogatory terms invented by the pharmaceutical industry to put any usurpers in their place through the power of language, sort of Orwellian doublespeak, to brand and name anyone who's not part of the, quote, mainstream system as being a wannabe, or being a fake, or a quack, or pseudoscience, or complementary, or alternative to what's real. It's dynamic, it's multifaceted, it's subtle, it's sophisticated brainwashing techniques that have been used for thousands of years with great success. The power of social pressure. If you have been brainwashed since you were a child, both by your parents and your society and television and advertising and all the rest, to believe without question, well, of course modern medicine is the real thing and the rest are just wannabes. They don't really have research to back up their claims. And research is the foundation of what science is based on. So if you don't have research, then you're not real. And in order to control that dialogue, research funding from the government, our money, you and me from our taxes, go into a fund in the government. The government funds hundreds of billions of dollars of research projects. The lion's share of that goes to pharmaceutical companies researching a new drug funded by us for them to make a profit off of us, when in reality, if we fund it, we should own it, but we don't. It's and not only that, but the purse strings are controlled by medical doctors who sit on the boards. You sit on the boards of the funding organizations. So who do you think is going to get the funding? Whoever believes in the same belief system as the people on the board who dispense the money for the research. So what chance do you think that holistic research in non-drug and non-surgical techniques, what do you think is going to happen? How many of those do you think are actually get funded? They don't. There's barely any funding dollars at all for holistic, what's called the CSCAT system, or the CAM system, complementary alternative medicine. Excuse me, but it's not medicine. You may call something like homeopathy or herbal preparations as medicines, but you wouldn't call chiropractors medicine, or you wouldn't call acupuncture medicine, or massage medicine, or Reiki treatments as medicine, or hypnotherapy as medicine. But the fact that medicine has been worked into the nomenclature as anything that is for healing is called medicine, is part of the Orwellian brainwashing technique to always have a medical term stuck into anything that is not medical too, just to keep your mind rolling and infused with the idea that medicine is the standard and everybody else is a wannabe. However, back to the email. So I get this email from someone who's interested in becoming a biotuning practitioner. This technique I do is sound waves. It's an expensive system. Not expensive for starting a whole business that will last you the rest of your life and make you a living for the rest of your life. It's a small investment. But there's a sound table and amplifiers and headphones and 3D microphones and computer systems and expensive software programs that are involved. So it's a fairly substantial amount of money. And so, rightly so, somebody writes me an email and says, I'm interested in buying your system and getting your training and starting to build this into my practice. But I've read everything on your website and this and that. And I'm disappointed to see that you don't have any double-blind clinical trials. And it took me a couple of days to answer this email, because the answer to that question is so deep and so broad, and it touches so many elements of how society is set up, and so many errors and erroneous belief systems about the sanctity of science and the sanctity of the scientific method and the sanctity of double-blind studies, that I didn't even know where to begin. And the impossibility of a holistic practitioner like me getting any kind of funding for any kind of research project. All of the research I've done is self-funded. Basically, I'm a clinician. People come to me as a patient. I've been in practice for 41 years. I've seen a lot. And from a standpoint of a clinician, my job is working for you. And what my job is to help you to get back on track and heal and remove the symptom alarms that are going off and fix the underlying cause of why that's there. I will combine a whole series of techniques. I will collect techniques over the years. I hear of a technique, I check it out, I research it, I talk to people, I start incorporating it, and if it begins to increase the outcome, a positive outcome, then I will continue to use it. So holistic practitioners tend to have a smorgasbord of techniques that they have collected because they work, they help the whole overall situation. But the bottom line is you get well. In research, that's not the bottom line. The bottom line is not whether you get well. The bottom line is, in most parts, 9 out of 10, whether a drug that is going through trials is effective or not in what the chemistry is supposed to do. If this one is supposed to lower your blood pressure, then that's what we're looking for. If we do double-blind studies in a clinical trial where we have group A and B and C, group A is the drug group, group B is the placebo group, and group C is the control group who doesn't get anything. Then if a significant percentage of the people in the drug group have their blood pressure lowered, then the FDA will approve the drug. Unless it starts killing people. However, the collateral damage that happens to people from these powerful medications, these powerful chemicals they're dumping into the most delicately balanced chemical laboratory in the world, this body of yours, the side effects are considered to be okay as long as they don't kill you. But they could damage your liver, they could damage your kidneys, they could put you in permanent health crisis for the rest of your life because you took something to relieve the inflammation for your joints so you don't have joint pain, but it kills your liver. Blood pressure is a good example of that. The medications for blood pressure do not work on your heart. They work on your kidneys. They're diuretics. So you're artificially adjusting the blood pressure by manipulating the fluid volume of water in your system, which is what the kidneys do. So by manipulating the kidneys, you influence the fluid volume of the blood that the heart is pumping around, and That's how you're artificially lowering the blood pressure. The problem is, if you take it long enough, it kills your kidneys. So the majority of people on dialysis with kidney failure are put there by their medication. It's not a condition of its own. It's not a real condition. It's a iatrogenic illness, which means created by your doctor. Iatrogenic means created by your doctor. And wasn't the Hippocratic Oath supposed to be do no harm first, There's ethical questions with double-blind studies, because one group is lied to by their doctors, which is specifically against their oath, the Hippocratic Oath. Do no self-harm, be ethical in all things, don't lie to your patients. It's always been a problem. The placebo group is lied to by their doctors. So that became, my answer basically to this email was, excuse me, but without getting too deeply into this, there is no funding for clinical trials for non-medical doctors. Because the people who sit on the board of the NIH CSCAT program, which funds holistic projects, is got a budget of $2 million a year. That is an insult. Modern medicine gets hundreds of billions of dollars per project. So it's a slap in the face. And the people who are deciding who gets what in the CSCAT system is medical doctors, not holistic doctors. So they're going to choose whichever ones are closest to medicine, and they're not going to choose funding for anything that is too advanced, that would have a real possibility of challenging a medical system that sells drugs to people. It pains me to even have to say all of this, because it sounds so horrible, sounds so money-grubbing. That's because that's exactly what it is. The doctors and the nurses and the physical therapists and all the other people who are under prescription by modern medicine, they're working their hearts out to help people. They got into it for the right reasons. It's just that medical doctors are brainwashed in medical school, because medical school is owned lock, stock, and barrel by pharmaceutical companies. All the courses are laid out by pharmaceutical companies. So the only thing they're taught is that's the only method they have to use. They're brainwashed into believing this is the most advanced system that has ever been created by humankind, and everybody else is a wannabe. Nurses are doing double duties and 12-hour shifts and 6 days a week, and doing jobs that they were not, that they didn't sign up to do. They're the ones who catch the mistakes. They're the ones that make up the difference when something happens. Many nurses can't take it anymore, and they leave the system realizing that's not what they signed up for, pill pushing and bedpan changing and all the rest. And they go and get trained in a series of holistic techniques and hang up a shingle and start healing people. There is the Holistic Nurses Association. As consciousness has been changing in the last few decades, and quantum research and holistic health is expanding and expanding and expanding the idea. Now we get organizations like the American Holistic Medical Association, where more and more medical doctors are leaving the system because that's not what they signed up for either. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that if your whole treatment is silencing symptoms, you're not digging down to the cause. And it's inevitable that if you don't address the cause and only silence the symptoms, then the underlying cause will be allowed to get worse and worse and worse until you become a deeper and deeper pathological patient in a system that gets more and more and more expensive the deeper your condition gets. So essentially, by only approaching the silencing of the symptoms and allowing the underlying condition to get worse, you are creating a more expensive patient in your system that is built to make money. That being said, that's led me down this road to have an in-depth discussion about this very question in this broadcast. The fallacy of the scientific method in light of discoveries in quantum physics and Newtonian physics on this hand and quantum physics on this hand are at odds with each other. The things that we consider to be a sound basis, springboard to jump from here in the Newtonian physics world turns out to be full of holes, full of mistakes. And when we examine ever more closely the scientific method, we see the glaring mistakes that are assumptions that whole systems are based on, which is like the shifting sands of something that has no solidity in the first place. Double-blind studies is one of them. The scientific method itself is another one. The whole concept of clinical trials is another one. And we'll discuss all of that today. But basically, when we're talking about Newtonian physics, the concept that the atom and the proton, electrons, and neutrons, and the electrons in the shells, and the protons and neutrons in the center, and they're made of smaller particles, and smaller particles, and smaller particles. All of this is in sort of the realm of Newtonian physics that we expect. From the standpoint of Newtonian physics, the world runs on mathematical laws that are easy to see and easy to verify, and everything is made of smaller pieces. All of those smaller pieces have names. The universe is made of building blocks that we can identify and put names on, and we can figure out the math of how they work together. Whenever the math doesn't work out, we fudge it a little bit, make an adjustment so it does work out, and move on from there. So all the conclusions beyond that point are suspect because they're not based on actually where the math led. Where the math led was infinities. And because Newtonian physics doesn't believe in infinities, it doesn't believe that the universe is infinite and timeless. It believes that there was a Big Bang, that the universe started somewhere, and it's going to end somewhere. So that tidily fits into the Newtonian physics math. But whenever that math points to the fact that no, it didn't start somewhere and it's never going to end, that it had no beginning and will have no end, that doesn't work for the math. So adjustments must be made so things are finite again. And then all of the experiments and all of the basis of science beyond that fudging point has an inborn error, which eventually is going to bite you in the butt, But as in one of my broadcasts, the broadcast called The Wall is the demarcation place where Newtonian physics that we normally expect the world to be breaks down at the periodic table. That's the wall. Periodic table of these atoms, where an atom's definition is the smallest material particle of a substance that retains all of its characteristics. For instance, an atom of gold. Smallest particle of gold that you can possibly have. And below that is just protons, electrons, and neutrons in a configuration. It's just letters in the alphabet, not making sentences anymore. And now we're into the realm of quantum physics, the rules that govern these super small subatomic particles and the smaller particles of which they are made, and the smaller particles of which those are made, and on and on. until, as I've said, you enter up into a field of vibrations that have no physicality at all. The smallest particles break open at the subquantum field, and in the quantum field, there's no more particles. It's energy, and energy vibrating in certain patterns that form standing waves. They look like they're solid, but they're not. Just like the sand particles on the metal plate that look like it's forming lines, but you look at the lines as just dancing sand particles accumulating in what looks like a line. So this realm is weird and strange, and time flows forwards and backwards at the same time. Schrodinger's cat is a living and a dead cat at the same time. Consciousness is a requirement for reality to exist. Reality has no independent reality at all. There is no objective universe at all from a quantum standpoint. Consciousness is creating it through its expectation of what the next moment is going to be. That's very different from an objective universe where things are here whether people are here or not. Once we get into this realm, all kinds of weird stuff starts to happen that collapses the validity of the solidity of reality as we know it from a Newtonian physics standpoint, where I'm real, I'm solid, I'm here, I'm surrounded by stuff that's real, has objective reality whether I'm here or not. From a quantum standpoint, sorry, that's not so. Nothing has any objective reality until consciousness arrives on the scene to witness. It's we are all creating each other. We are creating ourselves out of whole cloth. Consciousness is the key to it. And once we start delving into that, we start to see how full of holes the scientific method is that describes this universe in objective terms, finite objective terms, with all the infinities erased very nicely so that the math works out. It's a mental construction of reality that doesn't meet reality itself. So the math always, sooner or later, runs aground. The scientific method sooner or later runs aground because you end up in these weird places in the macro universe whose foundation is a micro universe that works on rules that don't abide here at all. This quantum universe is filled with weirdness and strange things that don't make sense to a mind that has been brainwashed and schooled in a Newtonian viewpoint of reality. It takes a lot. It's sort of like an enlightening meditation to release my mind from its schooling that the universe is a tidy mathematical construction that has objective reality based on mathematics. In reality, that's not so in a quantum field. So Newton is sort of the laws and the mathematics of Newton, Newtonian universe, work quite handily for gross manipulation of physical objects in this macro universe. But when push comes to shove, when things get small enough, it all falls apart and doesn't work at all. But for the big things of the sort of the gross measurement of planetary orbits, where it doesn't have to get too fine, it works quite nicely. But once we get to this realm, where energy and matter are two different forms of the same thing, and how much energy has to coalesce to form the smallest particle of matter, which is what this formula is all about. Energy equals matter. And the amount of energy that has to coalesce until the smallest particle of matter can show up, is the amount of energy that would be required to accelerate this particle of matter to the speed of light times itself. That's monstrously, unimaginably huge, gigantic amounts of energy contained in every atom of your body, right? And we all know how much energy is contained in an atom because of our experiences with the atomic bomb. So we have literally billions and trillions of atomic bombs in our structure, according to this formula here. All of it coming from deductive reasoning inside of the brain of this guy right here. It came as an idea. It didn't come from stumbling through a series of experiments where you stumbled on a principle that was a surprise to you by accident. This was full-blown imagination, full-blown deductive reasoning in the brain came up with this conclusion, and then the experiments were to prove its validity. So, you know, when it comes to Newtonian physics and quantum physics, you know, do not observe. Can observing sometimes changes outcome? So now we're into the depth of the weirdness that we see in quantum physics, that sort of defies what appears to be solid science. I mean, look at this picture. Doesn't it convince you that these people know what they're doing, and that the results of, you know, billions of dollars of equipment in a nice lab funded by pharmaceutical companies to make it look good? People got white coats on, they've got diplomas on the walls, they're using all the math of Newtonian physics that seems to work quite nicely to show that this chemical is going to have this effect, and pay no attention to those pesky side effects. Those aren't the real deal here. The real deal is we're lowering your blood pressure, and never mind what it's doing to your kidneys. I mean, that's not what the drug is. It's a blood pressure medication. It's not a kidney killer medication. You know, once again, Orwellian doublespeak. If I call the other symptoms that are collateral damage to your body, if I call those side effects, then it seems to kind of discount them, right? It's like the real effect is the blood pressure dropping. The side effects is killing your kidneys and messing up your liver and, you know, this and that. Because they're side effects, they seem to have less value. They're not real things. They're like side things, not the real thing, right? But excuse me, no. A pill that you take for blood pressure is a powerful chemical dumped into the most delicately balanced chemical laboratory in the world, this one. And the people who are creating that pill are not in control of all the effects that pill will have. As long as the dominant effect is lowering your blood pressure, all of the non-dominant effects are discounted as it's okay. It's like, you know, when we do the math, there's a certain amount of collateral damage that's acceptable to make a profit. Never mind the Hippocratic oath of do no harm. But a hospital is like a stage set, a multi-billion-dollar stage set to give validity to the guy in the white coat with the diplomas on the wall, which were given by the pharmaceutical industry. You know. So this whole cultural brainwashing of a certain viewpoint of health and disease, delivered by a massive trillion-dollar industry, a for-profit enterprise, is hoodwinking everyone. It's the biggest shell game in history. Where classical physics, Newtonian physics, has to climb a solid hill that's actually there, quantum physics realizes that this is full of holes. We can tunnel straight through it, through other dimensions, and come out the other end faster. By rules and regulations that form the foundation of what these people think is a solid universe, this solidity is an illusion created by the math that allows tunneling to take place. So the mathematics of Newton work well in a gross form to describe the sort of coarse reality of Newtonian physics, of the macro world that we experience. But as soon as you get into the fine details, it all begins to fall apart. And from Einstein himself, the only source of knowledge is experience. That is what I talk about when I'm saying the only validity is whether a person actually gets well or not, right? So people that come to the clinic, they get well or they don't get well. And when you adjust your techniques and you realize that that's why it's called a practice. You're practicing on manipulating techniques that you're assembling to get the best mix that has the best outcome. And when people get well from that, if you haven't done double-blind research studies, then all of the people who have gotten well over the decades from your practice is considered to be anecdotal. Another one of those fancy schmancy words which tries to delegitimize something that is actually the most important aspect of all. Results. Something happens. Something happens with no side effects that kill you. Something real happens. Not the appearance as if something's happening. Right? I've got high blood pressure, so I'm giving you this pill. You say, oh, a miracle of science. It actually fixed the blood pressure. Excuse me, but that's not so. It did not fix the blood pressure. It masked why the blood pressure was high by artificially lowering the blood pressure, and the real problem is still down there, festering away, creating new problems. So these anecdotes, levels of evidence, and why scientists may seem obsessed with controls, placebos, and blind studies, So this preponderance of reliance on standardization levels of evidence, a scientific method, and double-blind studies and all the rest, is another fallacy that's going on in modern medicine and science in general. Science and medicine wants the world to be a square-edged, tiny place, sort of a tidy mathematical box that can be described from all angles. And the universe never fits into that box. The universe always confounds your mind by always being out of the box in one way or another. So these tidy little techniques never completely describe the situation, and they never completely work that way. It doesn't work that way. But because the scientific viewpoint is that the universe is a handy place described by math, and hiding behind the curtain the fact that the math has been manipulated to remove the infinities, so that the math that they're pointing out makes science the big deal, is actually based on a fallacy inside, underneath that. And anecdotal evidence is often the best evidence of all, because it's where the rubber meets the road. It's where something actually takes place. Anyone who ever had any interest in science will know that anecdotal evidence is the worst type of evidence possible. It's sort of like hearsay. This is what scientists and science teachers repeatedly tell their audience. But is this statement true? If you have a look at the subject matter closely, it doesn't appear to be so. There are many situations where anecdotal evidence is the best evidence possible. In fact, even the most hardcore scientists use it regularly for very important life decisions. Not everything can be subjected to double-blind studies. So the concept of this double-blind study, where double-blind means that the patients don't know which pill they're getting, placebo or the real thing, and the doctor that's handing the pills out also does not know. So there's two blinds. The doctor doesn't know which pill is the real one. The patients don't know which ones are the real one. But there's troubles in paradise. The troubles with double-blind placebo studies, and there's many. So, for instance, in light of quantum physics, there's a few things that start to come to bear. Number one, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. The act of observing changes the observed. Right there, there's double-blind studies right out the window, because the setting up the experiment itself is going to change the results of the experiment. And even if you've got a doctor who doesn't know which pill is the placebo pill, there's underlying belief systems that shift the quantum field right off the bat. That the doctor believes that medicine is the cure-all of all things, that it's the standard to which all other things are measured. And that belief system is going to set up the quantum field to make the actual pill be superior to the placebo pill. And that's communicated to the patients who have been brought up in a society where they've been continually brainwashed to believe that modern medicine is the best, the coolest thing since sliced bread, that it's the standard that other things are measured by. So with that in place, we've got a problem right off the bat. Number two, since from a quantum standpoint, the doctor over here and the two people, the two groups over here, also have a belief that my body is mine, that this is me, that my body is here, and that my body ends at this space. We also know that that's not true. We know that in a quantum field, there's no place where my body begins, and there's no place where it ends. That Newtonian physics fallacy is not true below the periodic table in the quantum field. This just represents a localized accumulation of standing waves. Those standing waves go forever. That means that there's no possibility of a doctor who doesn't know which pill is which being completely separated from all the other doctors who prepared the pills and put them in the separate containers, and they do know. Somebody has to know which pill is the real pill and which pill is the placebo. You put a blindfold on the doctor who passes them out. That's not good enough, because it's good enough from a Newtonian physics view, but that's a fallacy. It's not good enough for the way the world really works in a quantum field. This person is intimately connected with everybody they know. All the lab researchers have personal contact and personal friendships and personal interactions as colleagues. These people know each other. They interact with each other. That means that they're connected. They're connected by sub-quantum fields. They're connected in a collective unconscious way. At the deep unconscious, collective unconscious level, the doctor who's got the blindfold on is fully aware of which pill is which. Sorry about that. There's no way from a true reality standpoint for anybody to be disconnected from each other. The variable is impossible. There's too many variables, infinite number of variables. They've been scrubbed out because that's an infinity. The cause of disease should be considered in randomized double-blind clinical trials. That's never the case. If every single person in the two groups or the three groups of the clinical double-blind study have unique characteristics that will affect their response to any pill. From my standpoint, there is a deeper fallacy in double-blind studies, and that's, the FDA is basically in bed with the pharmaceutical companies. They're the rubber stamp for pharmaceutical drugs. And they police the competition and hassle them and make life difficult for them. That's their job. The funding agencies are in bed with both of those. The funding only goes to medical and gives a hassle to anybody else who's non-medical, who's looking for research dollars. Modern medical system gets all the cool equipment, the fMRI machines and the squid devices and the $300,000 EEG brain mapping computers. Holistic research does not get those tools. Therefore, it's easy for the scientific modern medical system to point a finger at alternative complementary practitioners and say that that's pseudoscience because they don't have real research studies. Meantime, they're the ones who are holding the research dollars back. But the deep fallacy is we have three groups. Group A is the drug group. Group B is the placebo group. Group C is the control group. Nothing gets done. And the FDA will say, if you can get a 73% response of lowering the blood pressure with the drug group, and then we will pass it. We'll give our stamp of approval and it can go to market. Everybody knows that the placebo group is going to have a 35% response, right? 35% of the people in the placebo group are going to have a drug response and their blood pressure will lower because the brain believes they got the pill and is manufacturing whatever neurochemicals are necessary to lower the blood pressure based on my belief system. This is quantum physics. The power of my body to heal itself is routinely thrown in the trash can and discounted as for somehow not important. It's not important because it's not a drug that we're manufacturing and have a patent on. So we have to throw that away. The power of the placebo effect. In other words, the power of mind to heal me based on my belief that this is going to work is all that's necessary. That's powerful stuff. And why aren't billions of dollars being devoted to researching this effect, the power of the mind to heal? That's the realm of holistic health, who are the enemy, so to speak, the contenders for the marketplace that need to be suppressed. So, of course, the scientific medical system can't acknowledge that the placebo response is anything that's important. It needs to be discounted. All eyes and cameras are pointed on the drug effect as the real thing. However, the fallacy here is that, and that I can't believe nobody seems to be taking into account, or more likely that it's being hidden, is that 35% of the drug group will have a response only because it's a placebo response, right? The people in all these three groups are all people, and all people are subjected to the same type of brainwashing belief systems and subject to the same type of placebo response, that my belief systems can heal me. Everybody in all three groups have that. And that means that when the drug group has a 73% response, that's not true. 35% of that response was placebo and not the drug. So it means when you look at the whole study where there's, there's a 35% placebo response in the placebo group and a 35% response in the drug group, that only leaves 35% of a response to the drug and a 70% response to the placebo. in the whole study of all three groups, 70% of the response was placebo response. Only 35% in the drug group responded because of the drug. The rest of them responded because of the placebo response. The whole thing is a fallacy. And that's the same thing with a clinical trial, a double-blind clinical trial of a technique. And when you try to research a holistic technique with the tools of Newtonian physics, it's almost impossible to do, because holistic techniques by definition combine various techniques together in a synergy of techniques that cause something new to arise out of that treatment that is bigger than the sum of those parts. Holistic practitioners tend to use more than one technique. They assemble techniques and they juggle them around and they move them around in a practice to see what combination works the best. And that combination works the best partially also because it's me and the unique chemistry of my energy fields and my DNA and my belief systems and my connection to the quantum field is affecting those various holistic elements that I'm using. My technique that I develop in my office is unique to me, and nobody else could actually really do it the same way. Even if they went and got trained in all the different techniques that I'm using, it would never exactly be the same because it's them doing it and not me. And they're different. They're a quantum entity of vibrational fields that are interacting with the techniques they're using. Every holistic practitioner is a unique thing, as opposed to what is being attempted in modern medicine to have a standard model out of a cookbook where nobody makes independent decisions. Everybody uses a single pill out of the cookbook. You have high blood pressure, I look in the cookbook, this is the pill I give you that pill. I don't combine techniques, I don't, it's monopolar. We're trying to take the human element out of it so that a robot could do the same thing. A robot could look into the cookbook, the standardized cookbook, and pick that pill with those symptoms. And the opposite of that is holistic health, where everything is intertwined in touchy-feely and conversations and empathy and many techniques woven together. It's the opposite of that. It makes it impossible to test with a double-blind study, because a double-blind study is trying to remove as many variables as possible down to one single thing that you're testing, one single pill. If I took my holistic technique and I started to unravel all the different techniques I'm using together for people and only test this one and only test that one, only test this one, you've broken the symmetry of what makes it work in the first place. What makes holistic health work is the combination and the synergy and the interweaving and the magic. So by using these double-blind trials that were invented by modern medicine to test a pill cannot effectively be applied to a holistic model. It can't. It can't work. It's like bringing the scientific method to psychic phenomenon. Somebody who has psychic abilities, and I'm the first to agree that 80% of are charlatans, because that's just humanity. 80% are charlatans, 20% are real. But because you have people who pretend and aren't real doesn't mean you throw the whole baby out the window with the bathwater, right? All of it has validity. Why double-blind drug trials are a science fraud. The more toxic the side effects, the more patients believe the drugs are working. You know. So essentially, all of those trials and all of those double-blind studies have one purpose: to approve a pill for sale to you and me at a monstrous profit. That's the purpose. It's not pure science. It's not doing double-blind studies without an agenda. As soon as you've got an agenda, you're activating the quantum field. You're going to make it true. You're going to make it happen. Then we've got the Heisenberg effect that I mentioned. The act of observing changes the observed. That means the whole idea of a double-blind study is out the window. You're changing the reality of the experiment by being part of it. We already know the answer to this is yes. It's been proven over and over and over again in quantum scientific experiments. Holistic systems are extremely difficult to research, if not impossible. Then we've got entanglement. The doctor who's blinded, and the two groups that are blinded, that doctor is entangled with all of his colleagues. As soon as I make contact with you, as soon as I touch you, as soon as I'm in the room with you, as soon as we have a dialogue with each other and we meet the energetic aspects of our consciousness in dialogue, we understand each other, we know each other. We're entangled, that's it. Forever. No matter where you are in the whole universe, your atoms are entangled together now. That means the guy with the blindfold, without knowing which pill is what, handing him out, that's a fallacy. This person is deeply entangled with the people of his colleagues who do know. That means it's communicated through a million subtle variances of muscle tension, facial expression, that can be read by the groups. The people in those groups are observing minutiae from their unconsciousness to yours, picking it up. There's no way to screen for that. The idea of double-blind is a fallacy. It can't be real from that standpoint. It's real enough in the Newtonian physics world that effects can be measured. But at a certain point of the fineness of the details, it's going to fall apart, and there's going to be fallacies built in. Once the photons are entangled, they become related in a way that defies classical physics, Newtonian physics. No matter how far away you're separated, you're entangled together. All of us. That's you and me in this group. All of us in this group are entangled. We know each other. We interact with each other. Our consciousnesses are aligned, especially since we're listening with these soundtracks with headphones that are aligning our consciousness exactly together scientifically. We're really aligned. Cleve Baxter, I talked about before. He's the one who did experiments with plants that showed if he hooks this plant up to a galvanic skin meter on his lie detector machine, if you harm the plant has an alarm response. It screams on the lie detector machine, and it doesn't have a nervous system. Then he realized that it was entangled to him, that all he had to do is pull out his knife and pull out the blade, and that plant screamed. It was reading his intention of harm. Pretty soon, it was linked to him all day long. Hooked up to the chart recorder all day long, it would have fluctuations of stress. And when he started noting down on a pad throughout the day, whenever a stressful event would happen to him, and note the time down, came back, those correlated. The plant was linked to him now. Whenever he had a stress response, it caused the plant to have a stress response. That became this book, The Secret Life of Plants. His later work is The Secret Life of Your Cells. Leukocyte cell scrapings from your cheek with DNA, put in a test tube, and you hooked up to a lie detector machine in another part of the building. If you stress the cells out with electrical current, you would have a stress response on the lie detector machine 350 feet away and behind a closed door. proving that my body doesn't end anywhere. It's an illusion my body is here, that it ends here. Those experiments showed conclusively that my body doesn't start someplace and doesn't end anywhere either. The fact that I think my cell is 350 feet away is an illusion. Deep down inside of all of us is a part of us that is childlike and is in more direct connection with the real reality of what's going on. Like Einstein said, the most powerful force in the universe is your imagination. It's inside here. It's in your consciousness. Modern science and modern medicine would have us discount the validity of an inspired idea, of a true new idea dropping into your head, whole cloth, like Einstein's idea with E equals mc squared. He had a dream. He was riding on a sunbeam. He wanted to see, what does the world look like at the speed of light? That became E equals mc squared. It happened in a dream, full blown. Our ancient ancestors worked completely from this realm, developing the grandest computer in the whole world, this one in here. This one we can rely on. Placebo effect is scientific proof that we have the ability to heal ourselves. It's really, placebo effect is the scientific evidence of holistic health techniques. It's sort of mind-blowing. What if the placebo effect isn't a trick? A trick? Here we are, Dr. Larry's empty bottle, cure-all, 0 ounces. Dose, as much as you want until symptoms abide. Underlying it all is the quantum field. It's expanding. Quantum computers, that's what this is right here. The brain is a quantum computer. There's something at the deepest part of the quantum field where reality issues forth from. We touch that when we go to the deepest stages of meditation and reconnect with the depths of the quantum field and the universe at large. Sort of way down at the bottom of all things is an amorphous thing that defies description, defies science, defies mathematics. It's always one step outside the box. Life itself, a self-organizing principle of consciousness that makes things, whose true secrets are always one step beyond what your mind can conceive of. One step always beyond. And that's where we're going today, Out of that field comes everything that we know of. Mountains and trees and galaxies and nebulas and animals and people and insects and crickets and the whole natural environment of ecology spins from this magic amorphous place. And that's where we're going today. So, headphones. And close your eyes, and here we go. once again, there's where you can get the soundtrack. My life is changing so much. I'm not sure exactly what's going to be happening in the next month or 6 weeks or 2 months. I will be traveling. I'll be traveling to various places in the United States because all kinds of research and development labs are opening up. I've got teams of people that are showing up, scientists and researchers and clinicians popping up in various places. So I'll be traveling around the United States in the next 6 to 8 weeks. That means that it'll be one of these broadcasts that I'll have to cancel because I'll be gone throughout the whole weekend plus Monday. So I'll announce that when that's happening. Then a few months later, towards September, I'll probably be flying off to Asia, reestablishing, a 2-year hiatus because of the COVID. I'll be back on schedule of going out to Asia 2 or 3 times a year. But now we have developing Europe and Dubai and other places, Brazil and Australia and things like that. So it's exploding. It's great. I mean, I've got nobody to blame but myself for my schedule being up to this. But with the advent of Amazon Prime buying the Heal documentary, my schedule got so impossibly busy that I actually had to stop taking new patients. There's no physical room for another person to actually sign up on my schedule. It's absolutely maxed. With no end in sight getting bigger, pretty soon if I didn't stop taking patients, I wouldn't be able to see the patients I've got. There wouldn't be a time for appointments for anybody. New format happening for me, which means it's got to be happening for you too. So fasten your seatbelts. It's all good stuff. And I'll see you next week. So take care of yourselves. Be happy and healthy and holy. And thank you so much for being part of this.